So thank you very much for joining today's Frogeex Green Tech Talk. Today we have a great pleasure to talk about sustainable architecture, regenerative architecture. Now, this is a very broad point, a very broad topic. Some call it natural system design. Regardless to that, we are really happy to have today with us Mr. Andres Cordoba Tejada from Löfner Schmelich Architectural Studio in Germany. He's representing a very specialized view on sustainable architecture, working with buildings in this segment for several decades. So happy to have him over here and presenting some of the key elements on that, on his work and experience, and also exchanging with our second guest of today, which I'm always pleased to have on board because he's always enriching and kind of pushing a little bit the discussion forward. Dr. Julio Campos, thank you so much for taking the time. Dr. Julio Campos is an environmental economist, so pretty much always identifying and spotting elements that are kind of maybe missing or kind of gaps in approach, whether it's supply chains, whether it's buildings. And this is pretty much a very interesting point that we would like to also bring into the element and topic of architecture and how to build to make it truly sustainable also for the future. So with this, gentlemen, I would like to invite Julio, if you would like to start the discussion with presenting a little bit your perspective on the sustainability of buildings. I mean, what is like the key concept that you are, challenging a little bit in terms of building in the future and now?
Okay. Yes, I'm not an architect, so that's not my main field, but as an ecologist, what I see is that we have two issues that are interconnected, the building architecture itself and the city architecture as a whole. So I think they are all interconnected. And what I see here from Brazil is that sometime between the 50s and the 70s, we lost the knowledge to make houses adapted for tropical climate. We have all those buildings made of glass, which are absolutely unsustainable here in Brazil because you rely a lot on energy to cool them down. We don't have, yes, but that's a kind of new approach today. We don't have water reuse systems on the houses, on the buildings. That's not something that's set. And as we are talking the column, there are two problems that I see in Brazil. One is about the cost. I would like to know a bit more about that from Andreas, how we can make sustainable houses, sustainable builds at a lower cost. And also is extremely yes, okay, that's kind of new subject, but extremely difficult to find architect, engineer that knows how to make a sustainable building, a sustainable house. If you go talk to traditional architects or engineers about a green roof, I tried that on a house that I'm building. They always start talking about all the problems that I'm going to have with that instead of the solutions. So what I see is here are those two things. One we had houses that were built to help withstand the summer heat. Typical houses with a high ceiling, high doors, a basement where the air could flow under the house, and that knowledge was lost, discarded. I don't know why. Today we have a very kind of standard model of houses and buildings. And this difficulty in finding one qualified professionals to design a sustainable house and offer affordable materials for sustainable house. Because when we talk here about a sustainable building, it always comes with some sort of high-tech solutions, implemented, and that pushes the price up. There's no discussion on basically, let's say, design of the building of the house to help it use less energy, for instance, which is our major problem here in tropical.
Thank you for this great points. I mean, yeah, Andres, would you like to reflect on that or give us your perspective on some points, and of course present how you see things or work with the approach? Then I have some questions for you already.
Yes. Well, this like only two themes are kind of the main themes, which already separates in itself to more than two themes, because you have a lot of aspects going on in those thoughts. I agree with you totally that around the 50s, but maybe also earlier, we lost the traditional way of building or constructing buildings, mostly in South America. We changed the classic or like the autochthonous form of building for a modern one based on the new materials, which allowed us architects new forms and new perspectives, like the concrete, and this classic typology from a single house built out of earth and wood or maybe bamboo, kind of step out of the floor with high ceilings and like 1 or 2 stories. It just got lost. And this is a main issue because the new materials, they allow more design freedom, I can say, because the form of the window is now able to be a lying window and not another raised one, because of the concrete. And that wasn't possible till the concrete came, because just a clay doesn't do that, or maybe a brick doesn't do that kind of thing without any help for the material itself. So, and also the urbanism, because we, in the great cities, we don't have the space anymore to have just one house and make it with a big ceiling. As soon as you get into the urbanism and you start building buildings with 8 stories, 20 stories, you got another problems than the ceiling. And you have to solve your climate problems around the facade. And here they also got a lot of very simple methods how to regulate the climate issues, the sun incoming issue in Brazil and in Colombia, and also in Europe. They just got lost, and we went to, we got kind of lazy, I must say, because we went like from a very structured facade in kind of layers you know, which were acting against the sun and against the elements and climate in the building, over to I have a glass facade and I have just an air conditioner. So, and that's kind of a big problem. It is a comfort one, and of course, glass facades, they have the advantage that you have a very good perspective when you're in the building. You're able to look outside, to have light into the building, into every corner, and maybe make the space a little bit like bigger for whoever it likes to. But we have to understand that a glass architecture is not a light architecture. So natural lighting is also a theme. What you're talking about, and which is in this climate thing, also like into it. Just it's not talked about it, but it goes hand in hand. So, and how did that happen? At the beginning, when we start creating glasses, the only buildings that had glasses were churches, and also because it was a very, very expensive material, banks. So it became a symbol also for having money, for being able to buy this material. And that's how companies or banks were the first one to improve a very wide scale of glass facades regarding the climate problems which come with it. So at this point, everyone was wanting to have that, and we just lost the count, and that's kind of an issue also. So you see here, there are many themes, and not also like I have glass, because with glass you can also work it and design it in a way that you don't need that much of air conditioning or very less. But you have to work the facade in all its layers and stop thinking about it's just one line going through, you know. But there is also a thing where we architects no more think about the window as an opening. It's a really design aspect or element from the building. We just make it like, right, I need some light in it and I make a window. But nobody makes really a poesy out of the window with everything which it can be done with a window, more than open it and look outside, right? So at this point, we really have to think about what we're doing. And that's one of the main issues of the energy consumption from the building and not being sustainable. So that is one aspect where we can, as architects, really make a difference. And then it comes also with some costs, because the more you exercise this window, the more elements you implement, like being very deep, making a thick outside, or making, I don't know, some kind of screen or something else. These are all elements you have to pay at the beginning. And then it will pay off at the end of like 10 years or something, where you really make a difference because you're not consuming so much energy. The issue about that is that the consumer or the buyers or the builder, they're not really interested in what's happening in 10 years. They want to know how much does it cost right now. And if you come with a number, just because of the facade and whatever, you know, so high that they say like, but wait a minute, a normal facade costs like 20% less. Why should I do that? With 5%, I get my air conditioner on top, and that's it, you know? So they're not making this kind of investment a long-term investment. They're not thinking about that. And that's one of the main problems.
Andre, so because it's already very deep into the topics, I mean, many aspects, as you mentioned, I was trying to make some notes here. So, I mean,
it's very complicated.
And I'm, you know, like observer, learner in this field. But it's a great bridge, actually, which you the journey that Julio started with the ecosystem fit buildings, with being as efficient as possible for the system, for the conditions that you have. The story, basically, the explanation that you continued with all the elements that you mentioned, like daylight. I really appreciate, also recognize the point around cost, and let's go back into that, in terms of what are the challenges for developers, owners, or even builders, to make this investment consciously, and what maybe also some motivations behind it. But a great bridge is actually to Carl, because Mr. Carl Welty is joining us early morning now from California. So thanks a lot also for taking the time and be here. He's also very experienced in the field of retrofits, specialized on also techniques enabling upgrades of buildings, or providing thermal comfort of buildings without adding too much technology that is increasing the energy demand. So what about maybe Carl presenting some views on your approach in terms of architecture, and then we could kind of go into the next point.
Thank you. And again, I apologize for being late. I guess Andres, Julio and Andres, you're from Brazil. Both of you are from Brazil.
Julio is from Brazil, and I'm from. I grew up in Colombia, but I work in Germany. I work and live in Germany.
Oh, very nice to meet you. I've exchanged some notes with Julio through LinkedIn, but I mean, everything that you're saying, I think, is I completely agree with, and we've gotten, to your usual term, we've gotten lazy because of air conditioning.
No. It's not because of air conditioning. We got lazy in the architectural way that we don't think about like the order has been changed. Right now you're not trying to solve the thermic problem of the building with the architecture, but you're trying to solve it with some technical.
This is I didn't finish. So for me, the air conditioning in the early 20th century was kind of the last bit of technology that allowed us to ignore these environmental, or make I liked eco-fit building. So air conditioning was the last bit of technology that allowed people, architects, to design buildings without having to think about the environment very much.
Yes.
And so, I think we agree that it's it all starts with being aware of the climate. For me, a principle of regenerative design is you start with how the sun moves across the sky and how the water moves across the property.
Right.
And when you think about that and you solve those problems well, that's the beginning of this I really like this term, eco-fit architecture, eco-fit building, or climate appropriate.
Yes.
So I think this is we are architects, but our culture, we're just not connected to nature as we used to be. Or if you look at, I like to using ancient cultures or indigenous people, the awareness of the environment was much higher. It goes from many ancient buildings were oriented, many cities were oriented properly to the south to take advantage of passive solar or solar orientation. Beginning, I think, in the Renaissance, when cities there was more interest in formal design, or God help us, people like Napoleon using geometric order from the Renaissance perspective to lay over nature, or impose upon populations. And so for me, that's another source of this thinking, that we start with a formal geometric order and object, we lay over nature, and have lost touch with thinking about nature. There's a few examples, but not nearly enough. For me, and I kind of maybe just randomly, but I like to say that I'm old enough to have gone to school in the late 70s and early 80s when in California there was a lot of interest in passive solar design, which still is, my thought about the history of this is that because of this interest in passive solar oriented design, which is this is what we're talking about, is came about in the 70s because of the oil crisis and the idea that humanity was going to run out of oil about now. And so some architects and people started thinking about how to make buildings more connected to nature and more efficient. And because they didn't have solar panels, they solved those problems with less technology, which I think is what we're talking about. But with cheap oil in the 80s, and at least in America, which unfortunately starts a lot of fashion or style trends. Ronald Reagan stopped a lot of policies that were in place to make buildings more energy efficient. But anyway, that's my but I completely agree with what we're talking about. I just put in terms of glass buildings, I put a link to the building that I think does a lot of that stuff you're talking about really well, which you might be familiar with, the Edge building in Amsterdam. Since you're talking about glass, the form of the building is very conscious of each direction. And there's a large atrium that faces north, which helps ventilate the building, but the glass facade is designed for venting and shading.
Right.
So I think that's, for my research and my sort of poking around that, I think that building does a lot of the things you're talking about better than many buildings.
That's true, and that's what I meant. That we the main, let's call it like the mainframe. It's of architects. They're very, like you said, not aware of the environment, not aware of the location from the site and how the building is going to react to the sun movement, and those aspects are very known aspect, like having this atrium or a patio or something that's not a new idea. We just stop implementing it. So and also a glass facade which also ventilates in shadows. It's also not a new idea. But and that's what I meant. We got lazy because we just forgot about it, and now we're like coming back to it, and but at some point, it's what I meant. Right now, many investors are not looking into like the further 10, 20 years, what this facade and this atrium is going to bring for the ventilation, for like saving some energy cost or improvement the building. They're just interested in right now, and this atrium is representing for most of them a loss of square meters that they can have some price on, because it's like air, that's not a price that you can rent as an office square meter. But that's how you always have this fight as an ecological architect, as I am, as you are, because we really make more out of the quality than for the square meter price. We're like, no, this is the right thing to do. Either you get less tenants than making it without an atrium,
And thank you so much for sharing your views. So, I mean, you also indicated a little bit the efficiency, the price, we have all these aspects around, health, energy efficiency, better conditions. So is it true that when you build, and there are different approaches to a sustainable building, some is it was noted also during the call, go the direction where you implement a lot of technology, you work with, I don't know, in addition, some green roofs, some green walls, you have some special windows that are, I don't know, filled with liquid or whatsoever that are cooling the building in a different way as an installation would do. Or you have this passive design or design options or this Asian design techniques even. So what is the approach that you utilize in your project? I would start maybe with Carl, like the approach that you bring into when you are planning or, you know, working on a project yourself. What are the kind of key aspects that you look for? And same question could be then for Andres. And then, yeah, Julio, please.
Just for sake of curiosity, as Carl pointed out, and Andreas as well, the past solutions, the solutions that we had years ago, for instance, I can go to São Paulo, and there are still buildings from the early 30s, some older than that, from 20s. And they are working when it comes to give some comfort to who's working inside them. And then there are those glass cubes that rely on a lot of technology to be comfortable inside. But my question, my curiosity is, if we had all those, we have to deal with heat, we have to deal with cold since ever. So we had to build houses since the first houses were built to deal with that. And it feels that we have lots of solutions lost or forgotten in the past that could be used today, and maybe in an affordable way for the people. Why that knowledge was lost by architecture? Why these let's say these high-tech solutions instead of I don't know, a design solution?
I think it's I mean it's I think you know, architects are not alone in our culture who were looking for the new Porsche, the new technology, the new machine. I mean, we in the computer industry, we race to for the faster phone, but you know this and I think it's kind of a Western condition to want, you know, more technology, or and I think also part of this is rooted in we have more confidence in machines to both help us analyze nature or just understand nature. So there's been a disconnect between what might be, as an example, indigenous people, where people think of themselves more as part of nature. And I think that there's been a part of our Western culture to trust machines more than we trust ourselves with nature. This is perhaps, for me, I have a very big interest in the history of perspective, which invented in 1413, not given to us by God. But so to me, this is a fundamental part about architecture, is that we're taught to think about architecture as object. Architecture is a really well-defined object within a particular type of space, and then from that, and extending that, then with the success of perspective became the development of perspective machines. And for me, this is the way we think about architecture, and the way much of Western culture thinks about science and nature is rooted in these perspective machines, or machines to connect it we put these machines between us and nature. Perspective machines are machines for seeing and measuring, but to me, there's also, the mechanical clocker. So there's just a culture that we rely more on machines and then trusting ourselves in nature. I think that's, for me, is kind of a large picture, but I think that.
And if I can ask you, Carl, so maybe we can connect it to the point. So what approaches do you use in your projects in the planning? What are like the basic principles according to what you work in a project?
It's as I said, the starting point is how to, being more aware of the sun and how water moves across the site. Of course, this in a glass buildings in a city, water is not much of an issue, is in a larger property. But I still think there's important to start with the consciousness of water, light and water, sunlight and water. And from there, and this is, again, I think why I like that building in Amsterdam is if you think about, for me, if you're thinking about the sun as an organic, as sort of a natural process, each side of the building is different. The north is different from the south, and the east is somewhat different from the west. So that's without getting too much. So the reason you think more organically about the sun is the building should then start to respond to each direction. So I hope this is answering. So maybe in conclusion, I would say that if a building, for me, when I see a picture of a building that's supposed to be green or LEED or whatever, if the north side of the building looks exactly like the south side of the building, then I think they're not thinking about how the sun and light works.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. For Andres, I would like to also ask you maybe if you have some key principles that you utilize in your work for planning a building, and you also mentioned some new materials, especially bamboo. You also mentioned bamboo. Do you work also with progressive new, or I mean, bamboo was here a long time ago, but now we kind of rediscover it and start to use it more and more. You hear all this hype around that. What is your point of, the principles that you work with and new materials? What you see as, yes, this is a high potential. We will work with this more, most probably. And if you have some challenges also around that.
Yeah, well, I totally agree with Carl, but about thinking or considering and studying the sun, but not only how it moves, more or less, but also where you're at, because the sun moves like you say, everything. The south there are more sun, and in the north less sun, and the west a little bit more. But it depends where you are, because of the angle, how the sun comes into the sky or into the building, and it also changes with the station. In winter, the sun comes flatter than in summer. So in winter, you really want this sun to heat up your building. So, but in summer, you don't want it. So that's why the facade is so important. And it is also what you're talking about. That's why I'm confirming that's what you're saying. But we also in the studio look into where we're building, not only because of the sun, but also because of the capabilities of the workers. What are they really capable to do? Not every construction worker is same studied or technical affin than the others, and they don't. So you also have to look into what kind of materials do you have there for building, because it doesn't make any sense for me in Germany start thinking about bamboo and Asian material if I have to transport it from Colombia to Germany because it doesn't grow here. So at this point, bamboo it's so great. It takes so much of the pollution away that still with the transport emissions, it's still being climate neutral, but that's not kind of how we work it, because the goal should be like have the bamboo here and make it a positive and not a neutral one. So that's why the bamboo haven't have to or hasn't been able to like really have a settlement in Europe as a building material, more or less because of also the bamboo is a tube in its form, and you also will always have the problem of the nuts because the bamboo has to be laid down in another in order to make a structure. So at this point for Europe, it's not a material which is right now a real option for a green building, and it remains in its uses also because of the fire resistance. Only a material for a structure within like kind of a roof structure, and you have your building made of whatever underneath it. So that's why it's like the environment. Where are you building? What materials do you have right there? And what are the people from this space able to construct? And making that analyze, you are able to make an architecture which is able to respond as best as possible for the problem. So, and that's how we look into that. And but if you're making a basement, there's no better material than concrete. And if you're and so we use the material which is best for what we're right now doing, and trying to make it as ecological as possible. But to give you an example, we all talk here in Europe about recycling concrete. And what is that? You take the concrete from a side, you just triturate it, and instead of mixing stones in it, you mix like the old concrete. And it should be cheaper, but it's not. And it's not only because of the regulation, because they don't trust this recycled concrete. So there are so many regulations that the concrete builder or producer has to be keeping an eye on it. So it makes it that expensive that you pay the same cost. So at this moment, or even expensive, so that at this moment there is no regulation also for a recycling concrete. Nobody and the client is not taking it because with no regulation for it, you get no guarantee. And no guarantee, nobody is going to build a basement without a guarantee on the material itself because it's not implemented in the norm. So that's all kind of another issue that we have as an architect about using some materials that we know they're good, we know they work, but you cannot implement it because maybe, like for example, with the bamboo or with the recycling concrete.
But allow me just one more like complementing question to this. So I got your point regarding bamboo, and you know everybody's really excited about the material, and you have also these other alternatives. What do you think about hemp being like a suitable alternative for Europe, that you don't need maybe such hempcrete? What do you think about the application of that?
The application of what?
Of hempcrete. Of industrial hemp application, materials out of that. You have insulation buildings. I mean, do you face the same challenge, or do you see the same challenges as with bamboo, or potentially, as what you mentioned, is guarantees and the lack of trust in the industry that this material can really cater and has performance?
Well, insulation has also there is a big factor in the insulation and also on the general energy consuming of the building. We as human beings are responsible for maybe 2/3 of the whole energy consumption in the building. And why is that? Because of our behavior. So we can make as green as possible the building, but if you're heating it up and you're keeping your windows open, so you won't be green at the end of the day. So at this stage, and also if you can put as much insulation as you want onto the facade, and the same thing happens. And it would be better that we change our mind setting into when we got winter, then we put some more clothes on and not like expecting to be at home with minus 60 degrees Fahrenheit or something outside, you know, and I'm inside wearing a t-shirt and a short. So because I have to keep this temperature inside also in summer, right? So that's one issue. And the second one is every new material has to go through a process of legalization, of recognition of the industry, and that's also a problem which comes also with costs, because there are people working on it, there are people testing them, and there are people also trying to not letting it come into the market. And so you also need pioneers, clients who are willing to take a risk and use these new materials. So you have some point out buildings where you can prove how good these materials are and how long lasting they are. And that's kind of the process we are doing right now. But those kind of clients are very rare. And so it's not very easy, but we keep on fighting.
So much.
I add one little thing. My journey for looking at alternative materials and learning about alternative materials started in 2000, because in California we build with so much wood. I came to the conclusion that wood is no longer a viable material. It's because of the way it's grown. I doubt that it's really so green and a smaller carbon footprint than even steel and used differently. But and I completely agree with what you're saying about bamboo. But I've learned a great deal from a gentleman who has really specialized in construction with cold form steel. But he shared this and this is a small example, but I think it's very accurate for how we incorporate new materials.
Yeah.
This is to your point of we move slowly, but the point is drywall, which is now ubiquitous. But he said he pointed out that it took 45 years for the building industry to adopt drywall. And the step between what was used before drywall to drywall was a pretty small step compared to steel or concrete to bamboo or hempcrete. So it's an enormous journey, and this is an issue I, as an architect, is that you hear about lots of different materials and people want to do things, but we have regulations, and I think we have our regulations that seems to hinder. That people think it hinders progress. I think they have a value in saving lives. I mean,
that's right, Carl. That's right. And yeah, I'm not saying that regulations are bad. They have the reason. They are also saving life. But I can speak for Germany. Germany is like probably the country with most regulations of all. And some of them they don't make any sense at all, and they're just making building very, very expensive. And at some stage you gotta ask yourself if it's okay like that, you know. I'll give you an example. Right now in Bavaria came with a new regulation for wood constructions. And they say, if you're going to build a wood facade, the building has to be able to be approached from the firefighter for every 4 sides. So what does that mean for the urbanism? How many streets do you have to build to be able to do that? So the whole European urbanism with the structures, with the patio inside, with the big yards, whenever they're not able to be made out of wood, and so it's kind of a regulation where you said like, okay, who who did think about that, and why does it come now? We're not building with wood like since 2 years. It doesn't burn differently right now that it did like in the 50s or the 70s. And we also have more and more regulations because of the fire proofing norm, and it's only keeps coming and on and on and on and on. And you said like, okay, what's happening? You know, that's one example. And between many others in Germany. But still, I'm not sure about wood. If it's, I believe it's not the only way to improve the climate change, but it's one step we can do is building with wood. And also when you're doing with a sustainability wood processing in your forests, that's kind of a main issue. But it's not the only answer, you know. There are many other answers. And regarding bamboo is good for the land they have it, but it's also had its limitations. So we need to use the right material again for the right proposition. So yeah, that's kind of
complicated.
It's complicated, and it turns out to go into a direction of hybrid buildings, you know, where you're not using only concrete, you're not using only steel, you're not using only bamboo. You're using the right material for the right space, kind of.
This is perhaps another conversation, but I would put the challenge in is that because in America, in the green design profession, there's a move towards mass timber and manufactured lumber. And I'd happy to share, you know, some of my research about like gauge steel and steel, but I think this idea that mass timber buildings have a smaller carbon footprint than steel, I don't think so.
No, they don't.
If you just watch a video of how lumber is, the manufacturing process of lumber, even just making a glulam beam or a beam, the process is so complicated, which I think is, to your point, we have to be really aware of the process of how it's the manufacturing of it and also the disassembling of it. So anyway, I think there's lots of anyway, that's it. You know, just one thing, because Andres, you talked about, you know, the sun angle. Absolutely, the sun angle. For me, it's not just the sun is not something that just is the same everywhere. You know, being aware of the sun is knowing that, like in California, it's 37 degrees in the winter and 72 degrees in the summer. And I actually added an article. One of my favorite things to quote is Socrates talked about this, and Socrates influenced. I think had a big influence on all Greek cities built after 350 BC. Most were all oriented to the south. In every culture in the world, Greece, Chinese, the cities were, you know, cities before, I kind of a bit of licensing here with history, but before the Renaissance, and were oriented correctly to the environment, to the sun. So that's Julio.
Julio had a question, or a point to share. So happy to hear your perspective.
Yeah. Going back a little back on the hype that you have on biomaterials, on basically bamboo, wood, hemp, or whatever vegetable. See that it's being considered for buildings. What I see is on this hype that is very focused on the a carbon aspect. It's a tree. It sequesters carbon, so it's good. It has low carbon footprint. That kind of tunnel vision. But as Andres talked about regulations, yes, we had we use it timber for buildings, well, since ever. But our seats, as I understand, the seats were they have a different design, etc. But they were very easily wiped out by fire. You said understood about using of hemp like insulation material. If you get a little bit of moisture, it starts to decompose, and then you have molds and all that. So I see a lot of hype on biomaterials when it comes to the alleged, as Carl said, low carbon footprint, which is not that really low. But all of the rest is forgotten. The safety issues are forgotten. And I think that is a little bit dangerous. No, because we're trading off, let's say, a small carbon footprint now for a material that don't last that long as a concrete or steel or whatever. And we're trading off for safety. Or we try, or I don't know about that, but we try to find some solution to solve that safety issues on fire, on moisture, or whatever. So I like it as Andreas puts that to need mixed solutions. We need to move away from this hype of magical solutions. And yeah, try to I got as Andreas puts that, yes, we want to know the price now. Once the lower price now, we don't think on decades to come, but maybe educate better people about that, because we're building something today that we want it to last for decades. Well, otherwise, there's no sense. Or let's build something here that you need to rebuild or fix in 20 times, etc. You have to keep fixing the damage that suffers. Mm. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your perspective, Julio. I also need to look a little bit at the time, so we're almost out of the time. I mean, super insightful, very deep discussion, actually. So it goes really across many different sectors and spectrums. So just to maybe conclude, I would just ask maybe a final question for each of you to kind of, in best possible way, to answer within like a short period of time. And then we would close officially the call. So with this, let me just kind of rephrase a little bit what we heard during the call. We heard a lot about cost concerns, about, you know, the challenges, the complexities that we need to face, the materials that, you know, not the simple answers that we many times look for in terms of buildings, especially because it's a lot of responsibility involved when constructing a building or when providing infrastructure. So what is but one of the elements that we heard also many times coming back was cost. So when looking also at making it durable, making it efficient, making it resilient and secure, safe structures for the future, how would you see the possibility to bring the cost of such solutions down? Or is there any type of approach that you would see to make, for example, sustainable housing for many people for low cost possible?
That's right. For me, and this building an energy efficient building in California is a whole lot easier than Germany, but the same principles I apply. It's easier here. I built a passive solar house in Santa Monica, which is easy. It's coastal property, but my clients have used no energy for thermal comfort. But my list of the best buildings, starting from a list from buildings on the Living Building Challenge website, of 111 buildings on that website, 8 of them declared that they were more than 50% more efficient than normal building. All of them, except for one of them, got the rules of passive solar. They got the orientation right. They use roof or horizontal elements for shading. So the best of the best buildings all incorporate these simple principles. The one that didn't have orientation right was in Hawaii, where orientation is not a problem. But the passive solar buildings are in some. There's very good. There's not enough, but there's there's examples that are 70-80% better than normal, and they cost less to build, and they certainly cost less to operate. If a building is using 20% of the energy than a normal building over the life of the building, that building is saving a lot of money and a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. So for me, a passive solar building, it's more efficient and costs less to build, certainly less to build than more expensive technologies that aren't, that may be 35-40% better than normal. So for me, a well-oriented building engaging in the climate is cost less to build than our modern technology, and certainly less to operate. So for me, building with nature is always cheaper, more efficient, more resilient.
Thank you, Carl. Well, Andres, would you like to add your perspective?
Yes. Well, right now in Germany, it is actually expensive. At the beginning, the maintenance cost and the whole operative cost, they are lower, and so you have to right now in Germany think about the next 10 years what your savings will be. But as right now to build ecological in an urban environment, not like in the free field in Hawaii or where you got space, because in Europe we're lack of space. It's not like Colombia, Brazil, or USA, where we got plenty of space and you mostly have 2-3 story houses staying alone. Regarding, of course, cities like New York, Chicago, and whatever, where you got your skyscrapers. So at this very moment, because of the regulations and the whole energy saving thing with insulations, if you go pure natural and ecological, it's right now expensive. And if you go to Asian techniques like ramp earth, you won't be able to make it cheaper, because right now we made ramp earth houses. That's that right now, it doesn't matter how you do it, you're going to be 2.5 times expensive at least than a normal building. So at this very point, you really need the client who is willing to pay for it at the beginning, knowing that he's going to get the quality, the health, and the savings in the next years.
Thank you, Andres.
We still do it.
Yes. I mean, and that's it's certainly like the beginning of the discussion, or there will be certainly some more parts to reveal and to shed some more.
And so right now I'm not getting like 100% ecological, but I'm happy if I get like over 60%. That is also it's also a big step. It's better than non-ecological. So at this point, I'm happy for every % of ecological material I get more in the building, and every system which makes me able to save some energy and make it properly for the health of the living people in it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Andres, I mean, I think you're saying is that some of these systems materials are more expensive, but if you have to spend a little more money, but they reduce the operational cost over the life of the building, then that savings is over the life of the building. There's some saving. There's some benefit.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But as I said earlier, right now the client is more concentrated in what's going to cost right now, and also with the supply changes right now and the difficulty of getting the materials, is the costs are rise at such a height that they're not able to finance these more costs. So at this point in Europe, we are like either you build or you don't build. But if you want to get it ecological, you're not building and you're already invested some money in trying to get it built, get it done. And right now it is very difficult. And so that's why many people right now are concentrated in the cost. Like for right now, I'm not interested so much in the cost in over 10 years. That's sad, but it's like the reality in Europe right now, in Germany.
I hear you. Thank you so much for sharing. Julio, would you like to add your perspective on that before we close?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with Carl and Anders. And we have this both sides of the problem. A green building is way more expensive today, but its operational costs over time is lower. So we need to it's a problem. It's being so expensive, at least here in Brazil, because it is so. To be sustainable, it relies more on technology than on design or architecture. But I think that mindset will eventually change, because we are already seeing extremely high energy costs, extremely high technology costs to maintain, to keep that system working. But yeah, maybe as it happened from the 40s to today, where from my understanding, architecture changes from a more sustainable building to a less sustainable building, but less sustainable, but relying on air conditioner, heaters, and all technology. We can start to reverse that due to the cost of technology itself, to maintain the technology. And eventually, hopefully, in a few years, maybe decades, go back to a situation where it's not that much expensive, but also people are aware. Yes, I may be paying a little more there. I will do a little bit of effort to pay a little more now, but I know that over those decades that I will live in that house, that will save a lot of money.
So that's
there's this analysis. Yes, let's pay a little bit more here. Today is not a little bit; it's a huge amount, actually. But over time, that will return on savings on energy, water, or whatever. But so hopefully, with climate change and some bad sides of climate change, as energy prices, etc., we will start to move back to more sustainable designs and materials that today are expensive, but it's a demand and offer side, I think. If you have an increasing in demand for those materials, they will get cheaper eventually.
So let's see where the curve gets us. So thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time, being here today, sharing your experience, your insights on the topics and the problems. We will have a separate session on certifications of buildings, where we're going to talk more about, different styles and of certificates you can obtain for whom is it worth to invest in. So welcome you there for sure. And yeah, thank you so much again. I wish you a very good rest of the day, and see you on the next one.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and look forward to talking more.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Yes.
And
bye-bye.
Please connect. Otherwise, I will. You have the contact details in the chat. So, and all of you are on Frogeex, so certainly we will eventually do something more together.
Yes.
It was a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you,
bye-bye.
John.
Bye.
Bye.